Hello, Facebook family. Hello, church. Today, another day to share the gospel, the simplicity of the gospel. I believe that the Bible is the word of God and that God has given us his word because of his grace and mercy and directions and instructions. Unfortunately, we live in a postmodernism time where people believe that they can do whatever they want to do without honoring and serving and worshiping the Creator. We have gotten so comfortable in believing that we can do what we want to do. As Frank Sinatra would always sing, I did it my way. But the Bible teaches there's another way. And I want to read in Galatians chapter 3. In Galatians, Paul the Apostle was sharing with the Galatians a few years ago, and he was sharing with them the simplicity of the gospel. How, if you believe in your heart that Jesus Christ died on the cross and you were evidence of it, Paul is saying you were there and you watched this. You watched him do miracles. You watched him heal the sick. You watched him as he was beaten and tortured for something he didn't do. And then you watched him when he was risen from the grave and came back and shared with you guys. So you guys were witness of Jesus Christ, who I now have sold my life to. Because Paul, at one time, his name was called Saul, and he was a persecutor of the church, the way. He felt as though it was necessary for him to lock up Christians and to stop the movement because he felt as though they were coming against what he was being taught, religion, the Old Testament. They had made a religion and they made it their lives to live by these commandments on the outside. And through his knowledge that he was given and the studying of the Old Testament from Moses, he felt as though this new thing that Christ is coming along, this Jesus Christ, this carpenter's son, hanging out with the tax collectors and all them pagans and all the poor people, Christ must be doing something wrong. He must be from the devil. So his job was, and he had letters from the governor and from the Sanhedrins and the Pharisees and scribes to persecute the Christians. But on his way to Damascus, he was touched by Jesus Christ through his spirit, and he had never been the same since. And so now he's teaching the Galatian churches. In fact, he set up churches, the Galatian church, Corinthian, and Ephesians. And so in the Galatian church, he has set it up. He was teaching them that by faith you are saved, by grace, not of your works. And they enhanced it. They believed this teaching. But then Paul comes back, I believe, a couple of years later, and he noticed that their teaching was a lot different. What had happened was that the Jews were now teaching them that, yes, it's true that you might be saved because of Jesus Christ, but you have to follow the Mosaic law. You have to follow our traditions and our cultures. You have to change your diet, and you must be circumcised regardless of what age you are. And so this was a new teaching that came in. And it was a new teaching that they were trying to teach the church. And Paul was frustrated, and he was kind of like, why are you believing this? And so here it is in Galatians chapter 3. He is teaching in the church when he comes back, and he finds out that the Judaizers have been teaching something different, and the Greeks and the Jews who believed, who were Christians, started swaying over to what the Jews were teaching. And so he says this in chapter 3 and verse 1. O foolish Galatians, who have bewitched you, that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ have been evidently set forth, crucified among you. Then he says, this only would I learn of you, receive you the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Then he goes on and says in verse 3, Are you so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are you now made perfect by the flesh? The question is, can believers be bewitched by false teachers? Satan is always attempting to deceive. These are my words. These are my footnotes, not from the Bible. These are my words. Let me start again. Can believers be bewitched by false teachers? Satan is always attempting to deceive the believers. This word foolish also means without knowledge and deadness. Paul he wasn't addressing heathens and non-believers. He was addressing the church, the believers. So can believers be bewitched? And he's talking to the believers, not to the ones that don't know Christ. He's calling the believers foolish. Oh, foolish Galatians. Oh, foolish Christians, who have tricked you. And we'll address this again as I go on. And verse 4 says, have you suffered, Paul is saying, have you suffered so many things in vain? If it be yet in vain. Have you suffered so many things in vain? They have witnessed Christ being crucified. And at that time, they were trying to persecute all the Christians. And because of Christ, Paul is saying, I'm putting in my words, it says, you have suffered persecution because of your acceptance of Christ. Was this all done in vain? So when he goes on and said, have you suffered so many things in vain? You were there, you was a believer, you know the Romans and the heathens want to destroy this faith. And you did all this, you stopped what you're doing in your life and follow Christ. And now you're following another teaching. Wow. In verse 5 he says, and he therefore that ministered to you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you. This is Christ. Paul is arguing. He, Christ, therefore that ministered to you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you. Doeth he it by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Was this done by the hearing of the law, or was this belief done by faith? Is this something that you believe? This is not a work of the Old Testament. He says in verse 6, even as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Know you therefore, they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. He says, even as Abraham believed God, it was accounted to him for righteousness. So we believe God. We believe that he became a living sacrifice, Jesus Christ, that he died on his sins, that he was God in the flesh. He put off his divinity. If we come into that agreement, it says that we have righteousness in Christ, that we're saved. And nobody should come along and try to teach us something different. But Satan has always tried to influence the believer in the world. This is his domain. That Jesus Christ is not the Son of God. That you should not even believe that. Because it's foolishness, Satan says. And the world says it's foolishness to believe in something you can't see. That is what the world teaches. But the Bible teaches that there was a Messiah, that God loved us so much that he gave us his only begotten Son, and God took off his divinity and planted himself into a woman and walked this earth as a human being. So he knows what we're going through. If you're going through stuff today, you can trust Jesus. Jesus Christ, God, shows us his character through Christ. He shows us his compassion through Christ. He shows us that he's a creator through the natural, through revelation, general revelation, and he shows us through Christ through him walking the earth and becoming a living sacrifice, that God loved us. And so he's saying to us, believe that I love you. learn from our Christ, learn from Jesus Christ, follow his precepts. And God says, there's nothing good that I will withhold from you. That is God's promise to us. And we can rely on God's promise more so than what man says. Be right back.